The crowd swelled around her, a tide of hurried legs and rolling suitcases, voices clanging like metal against metal. She pressed herself against the cold glass of the station wall, hands trembling slightly as she clutched the handle of a small worn suitcase. The leather was cracked at the corners, and she traced the creases with her fingers, as if mapping the years she hadn't noticed passing. A gust of wind slipped through the open doors, tugging strands of her hair across her face. She brushed them away, but the sensation lingered, sharp against her skin. Somewhere across the hall, a train whistle shrieked, making her heart jump. Her gaze found him before she could stop it. He stood by the ticket kiosk, coat collar turned up, phone pressed to his ear. She had memorized the tilt of his head, the faint curve of his smile when he thought no one was watching. Her breath caught, and her fingers tightened around the suitcase handle. The red scarf around her neck fluttered, catching the light in sudden flashes of crimson. She remembered buying it on a whim, a shield against something she didn't yet know she would need protection from. Maybe he won't notice, she whispered to herself. The thought felt hollow like glass scraping over teeth. She took a careful step forward, then froze, eyes searching for any hint that he recognized her. The station felt too loud, too bright, the scent of coffee and rain mingling with the sting of her own panic. Her hand shook. One finger traced the edge of the suitcase again. A memory surfaced, cold fluorescent lights, a waiting room, a clipboard held so high it almost touched the ceiling, and a voice she could never forget. "You're obese. You need to change." She swallowed. The sound of her own heartbeat seemed loud, echoing in her ears over the announcements and laughter around her. The red scarf tugged at her neck again, almost like a warning. She could have walked away, blended back into the tide of travelers, but something tethered her here, something fierce and unspoken. Her eyes flicked back to him, the man she had hated and feared, whose judgment had carved lines she carried without knowing, was just a few steps away, completely unaware of the storm behind her gaze. A train door clanged open. People surged toward it. She took a breath, gripping the suitcase like it held her entire life. And then she realized she didn't know what would happen next. The station's crowd thinned slightly, leaving pockets of strangers standing still or rolling by on luggage wheels. She sank onto a cold bench, suitcase at her feet, and watched people reunite with laughter and tight hugs. A mother knelt to embrace a child. A man lifted his partner off the ground in a careless, happy spin. She looked down at the worn leather of her suitcase. Its handle was frayed, corners battered. She remembered a smaller bag, the one her father had carried on trips when she was 8. He'd let her hide little treasures in it. Pressed flowers, notes folded into squares, a cracked watch he jokingly said measured time, better than anyone else. That suitcase had carried hope. This one carried something heavier, her quiet determination, wrapped in the red scarf around her neck. Her stomach twisted. She had counted every coin for weeks to even get this train ticket. She remembered sleeping on the floor of her small apartment, the radiator groaning above her, trying to ignore the hunger pangs. Friends had drifted away when she refused their late-night calls, too busy with shifts and deadlines. She had worked, saved, and now finally she was here. But being here meant standing at the edge of a memory she didn't know she could face. She glanced up and there he was again, the man who had written her off with a clinical sentence, standing just across the hall. His gaze, when it landed on her, was quiet but deliberate, not the casual glance of a passerby. He didn't move, didn't call out. It was the kind of silence that demanded recognition. Her fingers twined in the scarf around her neck, the red silk brushing her chin. It was a shield, yes, but also a reminder. She had survived whispers, judgments, and lonely nights. She wanted him to see her, not the version he dismissed, but the one who had clawed her way to this moment. The train's whistle cut through her thoughts. She rose, suitcase rolling beside her, and tried to steady the shake in her legs. People began filing toward the doors. Some glanced at her, some ignored her. The man's eyes followed, unflinching, as if weighing what she carried against something invisible only he could feel. Her heartbeat quickened. She moved a step, then stopped, staring at the suitcase, at the scarf, at the fragments of herself laid bare in this public space. The red scarf fluttered in the draft again, like it was urging her forward, or holding her back. He smiled. Just a fraction of a smile, almost confused, almost tender. Not mocking, not dismissive. It lingered longer than it should. Unspoken questions in the curve of his lips. Her hand hovered over the suitcase handle. A step forward, a step back. The train doors groaned. She froze, caught between leaving and staying. Somewhere deep inside, a storm waited. The rain began as a whisper, soft against the glass walls of the station. She noticed it through the streaked windows, droplets forming tiny rivulets that raced each other down the pane. The suitcase beside her now seemed heavier, as if the sky had decided to press down alongside her own doubts. He remained across the hall, leaning slightly on a railing, hands shoved into the pockets of his coat. The way he shifted weight from one foot to the other told her he wasn't leaving yet. His presence deliberate, like a quiet tide drawing her closer. Her gaze drifted to his shoes, scuffed at the heels, the kind worn down by long walks or missed trains. Small details like that always struck her, the ones that revealed stories beneath appearances. A glimpse of a folded photograph slipped from the edge of his wallet, tucked just so, almost hidden. She caught herself staring too long. He noticed but didn't comment, didn't move. The silence between them was a question that refused to be answered. Memories pressed in. She remembered late nights counting bills, feeling her stomach empty while everyone else slept warm and fed. She remembered the doctor's words like a brand on her chest. "You're obese. You need to change." That voice had lingered long after the fluorescent lights went dark, and every mirror, every scale, every whispered judgment had reminded her. And now here he was, shoulders slightly hunched, hands silent in his pockets, carrying the weight of something she couldn't name. Maybe regret, maybe the same quiet pressure she had carried for years. A clap of thunder shook the station, louder than the announcements, rattling the roof. She flinched, tugging the scarf closer around her neck. The rain had started drumming faster now, hammering against the metal and glass, a reflection of her heart. She wanted to turn, to leave, to slip into the crowd and hide from him forever. But her feet refused to obey. They were glued to the concrete floor, drawn forward by some invisible thread that pulsed between them. She wondered if this was fate or something darker, a subtle test she hadn't agreed to. Every glance, every deliberate pause in his movements seemed calculated. And yet, she saw in him a reflection of herself. Someone trapped by words, judged by a fleeting sentence, someone carrying unseen burdens under a calm exterior. The red scarf, soaked now, clung to her collarbone. She wanted to pull it tighter, shield herself from the storm, from the past, from him. Yet a part of her ached to understand why he lingered, why he hadn't left, why he hadn't spoken, why his silence felt more revealing than any apology or confession ever could. Another thunderclap. A gust of wind swept through the station, rattling the doors. He tilted his head, as if listening to something she couldn't hear. She stepped forward, then froze. And for the first time the question wasn't about her alone. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the station slick and shining under the overhead lights. She clutched the suitcase tighter, feeling the leather press into her palms like a heartbeat she hadn't yet recognized. Her legs trembled. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to vanish into the crowd before he could speak, before the memory of that judgmental voice. Obese, change yourself. Tangled with the current one. Silent, deliberate, waiting. People brushed past, murmuring, laughing, their faces turned toward someone else's story. Some glanced at her, some lingered a moment too long, curiosity or quiet judgment in their eyes. She felt their gaze like a weight pressing down. She adjusted the red scarf around her neck, the fabric damp now, clinging to her like a second skin. Some people carry more than just bags. They carry silence, she thought. And suddenly the suitcase felt heavier than ever. Her feet carried her a few steps forward, then stopped. She closed her eyes. A memory surfaced, her father kneeling beside her bed when she was 10, holding that tiny, cracked suitcase she had treasured, whispering, "Carry it carefully. It holds the pieces of you that matter." She traced the worn corners, and for the first time in years it wasn't just a bag. It was everything she'd survived, every whispered insult, every lonely night, every coin saved. Her eyes opened and he was there. Not moving, not speaking, but holding something in his hands. The red scarf. She froze. Her fingers tingled as if he had reached inside her, into every hidden thought she had refused to voice. He met her gaze with a weight she couldn't read. Neither apology nor threat, just presence. Her heart raced. The urge to flee clawed at her, but something rooted her to the spot. She imagined stepping back, turning her back on everything she had fought to become, leaving the suitcase behind, leaving the memory of him behind. But the scarf was a tether, a challenge, a reminder that she could not leave yet. A man with a briefcase muttered something under his breath as he passed, a look like she didn't belong. A mother shushed her child in passing, not noticing the glance she stole at them. Society murmured in small ways, tiny ripples of judgment, reminding her she had always been an outsider in someone else's story. The air felt charged. Every breath was a battle, every heartbeat a warning. Her hand hovered over the suitcase handle. She took one step forward, then another, and stopped. The scarf fluttered again between them, soaked and trembling. She swallowed. He held it out but said nothing. And in that silence she realized, this moment could break her, or it could set her free. But she didn't know which. The station lights reflected off the puddles, and she could feel the chill of the damp seeping into her coat. The red scarf hung between them like a fragile thread, taut and vibrating with unspoken tension. Her fingers brushed it, half expecting him to pull it away, but he only let it rest there, weightless yet impossibly heavy. Something about the way he held it made her stomach twist. She remembered the phrase she had whispered to herself on the train. Some people carry more than just bags, they carry silence. Now she realized he carried silence of his own, a silence that wasn't emptiness, but a shadow of grief she hadn't seen before. Her gaze dropped to his hands again, noticing a delicate engraving on a small bracelet peeking from beneath his sleeve. A name etched in looping script, Clara. And then it hit her, the scarf. The red scarf. Not just a random piece of fabric she had bought on a whim. She remembered a photo she had glimpsed in his wallet weeks ago. A little girl smiling with the same red scarf wrapped around her shoulders. It had been his daughter. He had lost her. And somehow the scarf had survived, finding its way into her hands. Her breath caught. Everything felt tighter, the air sharper. It was no longer about revenge or judgment, or the past that had carved her. It was about understanding, about stepping into a story she hadn't realized she had been part of all along. The weight of the scarf pressed against her chest, heavier than the suitcase. Then came the twist she hadn't expected. His coat brushed against a brochure left on the bench, a corporate logo she had seen before, one she had recently applied to, hoping against hope that her resume would stand out among the dozens of others. She scanned it quickly, stomach dropping. He wasn't just a man she had loathed in memory. He was the owner of the very company she had been desperate to join. Her hands shook, her mind spun. Every calculation she had made, every step she had taken to prove herself, had led to this confrontation. And now it wasn't just personal, it was professional, public, irrevocable. The suitcase at her feet felt lighter and heavier at once. She realized she had crossed a line. There was no walking away. The moment demanded something from her she couldn't yet name. Courage, audacity, recklessness. The red scarf fluttered one last time in the faint breeze, and she let go of the handle of the suitcase. She inhaled, squared her shoulders, and stepped forward into the office lobby beyond the glass doors, her pulse echoing like thunder. The door closed behind her with a click that sounded like destiny. There was no turning back now. The gym was alive with the metallic hum of machines, the rhythmic thud of weights meeting rubber mats, the low buzz of conversations echoing under fluorescent lights. She stood just inside the doorway, her suitcase forgotten, the red scarf wrapped around her wrist like a binding. The same girl who once shrank in the shadows of a waiting room now stood taller, breath steady, eyes unflinching. And then she saw him, No longer a stranger across a train station, no longer a memory that gnawed at her ribs. He was here, walking the polished floors of her gym, the place she had built from sweat and hunger and sleepless nights. The same man who once dismissed her with clinical precision now paused at the threshold, his gaze catching hers, heavy with recognition. The silence stretched. The echo of the past whispered against the clatter of the present. "You run this place?" His voice cracked slightly, stripped of authority. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she laid the scarf across the reception desk, smoothing the fabric with slow, deliberate fingers. "Some people carry more than just bags," she murmured, her words barely above the hum of the treadmills. "They carry silence. You taught me that, even when you didn't mean to." He blinked, eyes dropping to the scarf. For the first time his hands shook. From his wallet, the photograph slipped free. The little girl in the red scarf, smiling wide, time frozen in her laughter. He reached for the fabric on the desk, but she placed her hand over it first. "She was yours," she said softly. "It wasn't a question." He nodded, the weight of it sagging his shoulders. "Clara. She wore it the day we lost her." His voice broke, and for a moment, he wasn't the doctor, the judge, the man who had scarred her. He was simply a father hollowed out by loss. And she saw it then, the invisible mirror. His silence had always been his burden, just as hers had been her fight. Different weights but the same gravity. The scarf between them was no longer hers to wield as a shield. It belonged to memory, to closure. Slowly, she slid it toward him, her fingers releasing it like a final breath. "Take it. I don't need it anymore." He looked up at her, something raw in his eyes. Not admiration. Not pity. Recognition. She reminded him of someone, not because she was broken but because she had survived. "I thought I was saving you years ago," he whispered. "But you saved yourself. And maybe you saved me too." Her chest ached, but it wasn't the ache of loss. It was rebirth, quiet and unshaken. She had wanted revenge, but what she found was something stranger. The chance to put the weight down and still walk forward. She turned from him then, stepping into the gym floor where clients called her name, her role no longer silent but seen. Behind her, the scarf remained in his hands, trembling with memory. The same place, the same silence, but her role reversed. And as she crossed into her new life, one truth echoed, haunting yet freeing. Not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever. The morning sunlight spilled through the gym's large windows, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. She walked along the quiet hallway, sneakers whispering against polished floors, the hum of the city outside barely audible through the glass. The bustle of yesterday, the confrontations, the weight of memory, the heavy decisions, felt distant now, as though she had left them behind in another life. Her hand brushed the edge of a drawer in the office, stopping briefly. Inside lay the red scarf, folded neatly, catching the morning light like a secret kept safe. She hadn't worn it in weeks. Yet its presence was comforting, a quiet reminder of everything she had carried and everything she had let go. Some weight, she realized, didn't vanish. It simply settled in memory, lighter and softer, but still shaping the way you move through the world. She paused near the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city stir below. People hurried to catch buses, greeted one another, laughed over coffee. Their lives pressed forward, unaware of the small battles and victories that had taken place here. In the spaces between words, in silent understanding. She smiled faintly, a curve of lips born from something deeper than joy. Strength, yes, but quiet, patient, unshakable. Her mind wandered to him. She wondered if he had kept the scarf, if he would remember her in the swirl of his days. The memory didn't sting anymore. It was strange, almost tender. Sometimes love is not romance, it's recognition. That line floated in her mind, soft as sunlight, and she repeated it quietly to herself, testing its weight. Recognition. That was what she had offered and received, in ways neither of them could have expected. The gym smelled faintly of clean mats and polished metal, familiar and grounding. She ran her fingers along the counter, then let them fall. There were decisions to make, plans to map, Yet the horizon beyond the glass called more loudly. She stepped toward it, heart steady, suitcase long forgotten at her desk, past and present woven into something that felt like freedom. The scarf rested in its drawer, the light touching it gently, a small monument to the storms and the silences that had shaped her. She inhaled, feeling the warmth of morning, the pulse of life continuing without needing explanation. Some questions would remain. Some paths would diverge. Some memories would linger like half-heard songs. And yet she moved forward, carrying everything she had learned without needing to claim it all. Not every ending answers the questions we ask, but some endings teach us how to live between them.